I'm Joanna Vicente, Executive Director and co-head of TIFF. Imagine thousands of protesters in the streets, violent confrontations between police and civilians, and hundreds of arrests, and the government accuses the human rights protesters of deliberately inciting violence. There was 1968, as the Democratic National Convention unfolded in Chicago. The filmmaker who gave us a window into the inception of a social network, who brought the beloved Bartlett White House administration into our lives and imprinted "You Can't Handle the Truth" into our collective movie memories, now turns his lens to 1968 Chicago and this defining moment in history. It is my pleasure to introduce this special industry event at the 2020 TIFF Industry Digital Conference with that filmmaker, Aaron Sorkin, once again with the trial of the Chicago 7, mines the past and illuminates the present. We're excited to welcome you to our new industry platform, a hub to promote films and talent. Here, you'll be able to access a series of live talks with the most celebrated voices in the industry, as well as our press and industry screenings. I'd like to thank our lead sponsor, Bell, major sponsor, RBC, L'Oréal Paris, and Visa, and major industry supporters, Telefilm Canada and Ontario Creates. Without further ado, I will pass it over to Elvis Mitchell to lead our conversation with Aaron Sorkin on the trial of the Chicago 7.
Thank you so much for that, Joanna. But before we get started in this conversation, let's take a look at the trial, the Chicago 7.
You know why you're on trial here?
The whole world is watching. The whole world is watching.
You all right?
I was until I saw that.
The whole world is watching. The whole world is watching.
Martin's dead.
The whole world is watching.
Bob is dead.
The whole world is watching.
Jesus is dead.
The whole world is watching.
They tried it peacefully. We gonna try something else.
The whole world is watching.
These rebels without a job.
They're a threat to national security.
It's revolution. We may have to hurt somebody's feelings. When you came to Chicago, were you hoping to draw the police into a confrontation? I'm concerned you have to think about it.
Give me a moment, would you, friend? I've never been on trial for my thoughts before.
The whole world is watching.
And welcome to the conversation. I'm here to speak to the writer-director of the trial of Chicago 7. I think his name is Aaron Sorkin. Is that you, Aaron Sorkin?
Yes, it is. It's good to see you, Elvis.
Good to see you as well. And I've got to start off with the obvious question, which is, why a movie and not a play?
Yeah, it's funny you should ask. When I get an idea for something, the first thing I do is think, can this be a play? And there was a time when I thought it might be, but it was always going to be better as a movie, and that's what it ended up being.
I only ask you that because I wonder, and I'm not giving too much away, but the first 10 minutes or so is entrances, the kind of entrances you can do and really give a sense of who these people are. I mean, for example, the way you introduce Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman, it's almost as if they're on stage in front of cameras. At one point, they could in fact be at a comedy club, the way they're lighted. And you introduce Tom Hayden in a lecture hall, in effect. So you're showing us very different kinds of settings for these people as you bring them on into our world. And I wonder if that was the thing that made you think, this is a movie. If I can offer that kind of intro and for the audience to really regard these characters.
Yeah, that's a good point. There are parts of the movie which would work well as a play. Those opening entrances that you mentioned, and it's also courtroom drama. But in the end, I wanted to show the riots, really, is what it came down to.
Well, talk about staging the riots then, because it's really the center of the movie. I mean, the movie changes after we see all kinds of sort of inference and flash forwards, but once we see the riot, it becomes a different film, doesn't it?
That's right. We don't see the riots until about almost an hour into the movie. We're telling three stories at once. There's the courtroom drama. There's the sort of a more personal story between Abby and Tom that we're telling. And then the third is the evolution of the riot, that big riot on the final night of the convention. How did it go from what was supposed to be a peaceful protest into a very bloody clash with police, state police, and National Guard? You asked about staging that. That was something I was pretty scared of. I had only directed one movie before this. It had 11 people in it. This movie was going to have tear gas and riots, but I got a lot of help, including a lot of help from the Chicago Police Department.
I guess I find myself thinking too about your use of media in the movie, especially news media. And there's a clip that for me is really the break as a kid, but seeing it now, I'm really sort of struck by it. Walter Cronkite saying, "This is happening in a police state."
Yeah. He says there just doesn't seem to be any other way to say it. A Democratic convention is about to begin in a police state. And when I saw that clip, suddenly I knew that the film was going to have a prologue and that clip was going to be the end of it. I wanted to show a prologue, something that moved very fast, that didn't just introduce our characters, but showed kind of a whole country coming off the rails in 1968 with the escalation of the draft, with the assassination of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, and how the temperature got so hot by the time they got to the convention in Chicago. But that Cronkite clip was kind of a gift.
It was too, because we should, for people who are younger than us, let them know that the idea of somebody like Walter Cronkite, who prided himself on impartiality, making that kind of statement was a de facto condemnation of the city of Chicago.
No, it's a good point. People don't realize that back in 1968, Walter Cronkite, a news anchor, when he said something that was understood to be the truth. Also, he wasn't given to hyperbole at all. He was kind of the consummate newsman, stoic. The fact that it's very memorable that he had to kind of rub a tear away when he announced that John F. Kennedy was dead. For Walter Cronkite to say a Democratic convention is about to begin in a police state, there just doesn't seem to be any other way to say it. That was a huge deal. That wasn't a guy trying to, get ratings by pumping something up.
And I was struck by, you sort of begin with Johnson and end with Walter Cronkite. These sort of basically these two sort of avuncular figures who were being made to, one was making himself irrelevant and one was making himself more relevant. And then you take us, in effect, to backstage with John Mitchell.
What I did was I decided that televised announcement from LBJ that he was escalating troop levels in Vietnam and so therefore had to up the monthly draft call. I decided, all right, let that be the first domino in this prologue and let everything escalate from there. And then, as we've talked about, we end with the Walter Cronkite and skip over what happened. We go right to John Mitchell's office months after the convention. We end right at the moment that the match is about to hit the fuse. And a new president has been elected. And we do go behind the scenes and we see kind of what the impetus was for the Justice Department to bring charges in the first place.
See, that's what fascinates me, because we can sort of look at this, and I see connections between Molly's Game and this movie, because first of all, there's a kind of a breathless prologue where you're throwing a lot of information and sort of saying to your viewers, I know you can keep up. I'm just going to lay this out for you. And then the other bookend to that is the kind of ego that often leads to court trials. especially on behalf of the prosecution. I mean, it's 2 movies in a row. I'm fascinated by both those bookends being in this movie.
Yeah, it's a very interesting observation. You're right that I like to, if I can, kind of parachute the audience into something that's already going 90 miles an hour. And that feeling of having to sit forward and catch up to it, it's exhilarating for an audience. And I've got a sweet tooth for any kind of courtroom drama. It just feels good being those 4 walls where the rules are so clearly laid out and the intention and obstacle. I like it.
But in courtroom drama terms, I do want to be specific about this. It's not just the pursuit of justice, but it's really about, in these 2 cases, and even in A Few Good Men, the idea of somebody's pride being damaged and pride getting in the way of proper procedural pursuit.
You're right. In all 3, and oftentimes in courtroom dramas and in courtrooms, the motive of the prosecution is an element in the whole thing. And in Chicago 7, there's even a moment, there's kind of a shouting match between Mark Rylance, who plays William Kunstler, the lead defense lawyer, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who plays the lead prosecutor. When there's an objection, Kunstler questions the motive of the prosecution, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt shouts back, "The motive of the prosecution is not an issue in a courtroom." And Kunstler says, "Not any courtroom I've ever been in, but this one." But the truth is, many, many courtrooms, the motive of the prosecution is an element.
For me, that's an interesting thing, and something I think is kind of unique to you, that we're aware of the prosecution's pride being affronted. It's pretty early on in this. I mean, in fact, I was thinking that one of the other things that connects us to Molly's Game is both John Mitchell and the prosecution basically are looking for what they call good manners, which is really to say, I want you to behave the way I want you to behave.
Right. And in fact, the climax of the film, right before the sentencing, is Tom Hayden, Eddie Redmayne, reacting to the judge's admonition: if you behave the way I want you to behave, I'll take that into consideration when sentencing you. And that was just sort of a bridge too far for Hayden, and he does what he does. In terms of ego and pride, you're right. When we're in Mitchell's office, what he's ranting about are these schoolboys, these hippies he's talking about, who are telling us how, hey, listen, we don't have to go back to 1968 for this. We can go back to, for you and I, when we're taping this conversation, last night, the 3rd night of the Republican National Convention, and the 2 nights that came before, when it seems to be about all the lawlessness from these bad people with long hair and no ambition and no job, and no respect for authority or for their parents, and not willing to dirty their hands with the war. It was that. But then we learn when Keaton, as Ramsey Clark, is on the stand, that it is something deeper and even darker than that. Nixon inherited an unpopular war, and these guys are making it more unpopular every day. Can we please decapitate this anti-war movement, get rid of Bobby Seale at the same time? That will create the America that we long for that never existed.
Well, as long as we're talking about the day we're taping this, we can't help but make note of the fact that another young African-American has suffered damage during a peaceful protest. And when I saw Fred Hampton walk into that hearing room, and I don't want to give any more away except to say that he's in this, and because in historical terms he has to, I think I felt a chill go down my spine, because there are so many moments in this movie that reflect on now. And another time, and I mentioned this to you, in fact, before I had a chance to see it, we talked about this, knowing what was going to happen to Bobby Seale. I'm not going to give anything away here, but knowing what's going to happen there, I mean, and that's a kind of violation of a person of color that we should be reminded goes back a lot further than we want to believe.
That's for sure. By a grim coincidence of scheduling, I'm trying to think of how to tell this story without giving too much away, but I'll say this. By a grim coincidence of scheduling, we shot a particular scene on the 50th anniversary of a particular event that occurs in this movie that you were just talking about. For whatever reason, that's the day I felt it. I felt the reality of it, and this was before Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, George Floyd. This was before that. The similarities between what goes on in this film, the similarities between the true events of 1968 and right now, today, are chilling. The movie was relevant when we were making it. We didn't need it to get more relevant, but it did. Somebody just asked me a couple of days ago, did I change the script at all to mirror events? And, you know, of course I didn't, but the world changed to mirror the script, is what happened. In terrible ways, including, and I'm sorry, we both have to be coy about this, Fred Hampton.
I guess that's why I'm so struck by that too, because this script goes back a ways for you, doesn't it? You wrote this how long ago? You first started it.
It was in 2006 that Steven Spielberg asked me to come to his house on a Saturday morning. And he said, I really want to make a movie about those terrible riots in Chicago in 1968 at the convention, and then the crazy conspiracy trial that followed. And I said, that sounds great, I'm in. And I got in my car on the way home and immediately called my father and said, Dad, do you know anything about riots that happened in 1968 and a crazy conspiracy trial that followed? I was saying yes to Steven Spielberg. I had a vague sense that there was civil unrest at the convention in '68. Had never heard of this trial. I kind of vaguely knew that Abby Hoffman was a counterculture figure. What I knew of Tom Hayden was that he was once married to Jane Fonda. And I knew that Bobby Seale was the head of the Black Panthers. I didn't know if that was good or bad. So I started from there.
What was one of the biggest surprises to you besides actual information?
The information, every bit of it was a surprise. I'll also say this. In 2006, that first meeting, I remember Steven saying, I think it's important that we try to get this film out before the election. And he was talking about 2008. We would say that again before 2012 and 2016, and it's happening now. The most surprising piece of information, listen, the judge did some crazy things happened in that courtroom that if it didn't say this is a true story on it, you would boo the screen because you'd just left reality. But to me, the most shocking thing is the thing we can't talk about. The death of that character, the details of what happened, blow my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's unnerving to watch, and I just saw it, like, 3 weeks ago, I guess I saw it. When I saw it, and because, listen, when is this going to go away? And it's a question that was being asked 52 years ago, and we're still asking it now, and probably asking it when this thing goes out in 3 weeks from now, won't we?
That's right, we will. I hope we will. I hope we will. And, you know, one of the things, oh, shoot, it's got to be terribly irritating for the people watching this.
People always say that when they see me.
I know for sure that if What happened to Fred Hampton in 1970 happened today, that exact same thing. Social media, there would be all kinds of information about what a bad guy he is. They'd post his resume. All you have to do is say he's a Black Panther. That he's the head of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panthers. You don't have to say much more than that. He's a terrorist. And no one would know who Fred was. When we started for real to make the movie, what happened was I said, yes, I started writing the movie. The day after I turned in the second draft, the Writers Guild went on strike. And nobody was allowed to talk to each other for months. And when we came back, schedule meant that we had to do other things. And Paul Greengrass became the director and Ben Stiller became the director. And then I asked DreamWorks, can I try writing this as a play?
Wait, you were going to write it as a play then after it passed through so many hands?
Yes, after doing several drafts as a screenplay and feeling like, okay, the problem here is that because of the riots, this movie is just going to cost more than anyone is going to want to spend on this movie. So I said, okay, let me try writing it as a play. But then it went back to being a movie, and what got it made were two things happening at once. I directed my first movie, Molly's Game, and Stephen was sufficiently pleased with it that he said, you should direct Chicago 7. That happened at the same time that Donald Trump was holding huge rallies and getting nostalgic about how in the old days they used to take that guy out of here on a stretcher, they used to beat the crap out of him, punch him in the face, talking about protesters that way. And Trump started telling people to go back where they came from. There's a black and white photo from outside the courthouse, for real, where there were both, Chicago 7 supporters and Chicago 7 haters. And in this photo were three signs, and this is 1969 now. America, love it or leave it. What about white civil rights? And lock them up. And so we just thought, well, this is relevant. This isn't a history lesson. This is going on now. And as I said, the world just kept more and more mirroring the events of the movie.
I guess I have to ask if you were concerned that the events might outpace, just because there's so much tumult in the movie. The movie's about a really turbulent time in this country where people are trying to figure out who they were and where they stood. And the movie's about a trial about a bunch of people who know exactly who they are and where they stand. I mean, were you concerned about, because who are those people now? Who are those kinds of activists who, go ahead, you have something to say.
Well, it's just interesting that you said that you put it that way, because talking to younger people about the movie and trying to describe who Hayden and Hoffman and Dave Dellinger, Rennie Davis, trying to describe who those guys were, trying to describe who Bobby Seale was, there doesn't seem to be a contemporary, anyone contemporary who's analogous to them. I mean, that's not to say there are not organizers and activists and people on the street, but Abby in particular, and Jerry to an extent, they were cultural pop stars. Those scenes in the movie it's basically Abby doing stand-up.
Yeah, because like I said, you shoot him as if he's at a stand-up club one of the first times we meet him.
That's how they paid a lot of their legal expenses. Were these guys going out on weekends? They were free on bail. These guys going to colleges on weekends where they would sell out huge auditoriums so that people could hear them tell the story of the trial thus far.
I'm going to ask you, since we're talking about the kind of impact these guys made, and I was really trying to get at who would the contemporary versions be of Hoffman and Rubin, who were, I mean, I saw Hoffman seems like Puck to me, and like I said, Rubin comes to feel like Lysander, and that's not giving too much away. It's really not giving too much away. But let's talk about how you cast it, because getting British actors to play the top legal part of the team and two of the spearheads of the Chicago 7 is really interesting.
Yeah, there are, it's ironic that a number of our leads are British actors, but what they are more than British actors are great actors. That's why they're in the movie. Starting with Sasha, who I really can't think of anybody just sort of who shows up better equipped to play this part. He also studied Abbie Hoffman. When he was in college, he wrote whatever their equivalent of a senior thesis or a graduate thesis would be on the intersection of black people and Jews in the civil rights movement. He has a very interesting thesis on it, but Abbie is part of that. None of these people auditioned. They were asked to be in the movie. That everybody did it for scale. They were paid in coupons, I think, and all very skilled with dialect. They all worked with their dialect coaches, were on the set, and Sasha would have earbuds in, listening to Abbie Hoffman speeches on tape until seconds before I called action. He would have Abbie's real voice in his head.
And Mark Rylance as Kunstler, too.
You know, Mark is in just sort of a class by himself for actors. The first time I saw him was on stage in New York, and then on the movies that he's done. He's a phenomenal actor, and he, like really everyone else in the cast, they're sort of like Formula One race cars. You really don't have to press on the gas very hard to get them to go fast. They don't require a lot of direction.
Well, we can't stop there. Let's talk about your Bobby Seale and your Fred Hampton too, by the way.
Yeah, Yahya Abdul-Mateen is playing Bobby Seale. He's a phenomenal actor. He's a few years out of Yale. He's on a popular HBO series here, Watchmen. One of the things that really sets him apart is how powerful he is when he's still. And I knew how important that was going to be for, this relationship with the judge. And that this is going to have to be a guy who, when bound and gagged and asked by the judge, listen, if I untie you and ungag you, do you promise to behave yourself? Just has to go, and we've got to feel that. So Yahya was incredible. All of these actors, many of whom, most of whom, are used to starring in their own movies. They all have different approaches to acting. From Jeremy Strong, who is a completely immersive actor, kind of learned at the knee of Daniel Day-Lewis, to Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who just kind of wants to feel good, just be happy and smiling and feeling good before the camera rolls. With Yahya, it depended on what scene we were shooting. Most of the time, he would separate himself from the rest of the group because Bobby was separated from the group. Bobby didn't get to hang out and yuck it up in the defense conference room or go home to the conspiracy office at night, right? Bobby was put in a cell.
In fact, he has a big speech in the movie that defines why he's been made part of that group.
This whole thing is, I'm not with these guys. I was there for 4 hours. The prosecution threw me in. They wanted a black guy at the defense table to scare the jury. Yes. So Yahya rather, would, without being antisocial at all, just, if you saw our guys between takes laughing, you did not see a Yahya there. Except on the day we were shooting his first scene, in which he's upbeat. This is his introduction, and he's trying to kind of tell his girlfriend, there's nothing to worry about. I'm only going to be there for 4 hours. It's no big deal. So he's doing it with jokes and a lively attitude, and that was Yahya that day. It was really interesting to watch all these guys bring their process to one place.
I think it's interesting too because in that scene, it's the only scene where he gets to move. So we get to see how he can own a room moving. So it's interesting to watch him stand up, not get to move, literally not get to move in the courtroom, and still own that space. I mean, that must have been one of the reasons you cast him, because you thought he could have that same sense of proprietorship in motion or still.
You know what, Elvis? I have to confess to you that until you just brought it up, I didn't realize that is the only scene where he gets to move. You're 100% right. I should have realized that. I mean, there are scenes where he struggles, right?
Yeah.
But that's it. In fact, that's the only scene where he is a free man.
Yeah, and there's...
You'd think that would have occurred to me, like, back in 2006. I have had 14 years to think about it.
Let's see if there's anything else I can tell you about your movie. I think what I'm really taken by too is just, you're talking about sweet spots, and I know Jeremy a little bit, and there's a sweetness that he has as a person that really is kind of the heart of Jerry Rubin here, that gets the flower in the most unusual way.
I agree on both counts. I agree that there is, Jeremy is a very, very sweet guy, a terribly nice guy. Like I said, a completely immersive actor. I love the way that Jerry, who on the surface is kind of the most militant character, but it's even he would tell you at surface, yeah, I taught a classroom how to make a Molotov cocktail. I didn't throw a Molotov cocktail. In the ways that, and we can't give this away, in the ways that he gets duped by the FBI, but still has this affection for the agent who duped him, and in the ways that he tries to stop those people from running toward the police. Whenever he wants to run and attack the police, he knows that Abby is there. No, you're not going to go run and attack the police. So yes, Jerry Rubin in Jeremy Strong's hands is a very sweet guy.
Yeah, but not just that. I mean, and it's, as you were talking about what those actors all have to offer, I was thinking about how some of their strengths come into play. I mean, just thinking about Eddie Redmayne's power with silence, and just, how when we see John Carroll Lynch just sort of looking at somebody, I mean, he can do so much with a stare. I mean, in this case, he
can do so much with a stare, and what you begin with John Carroll Lynch is, and this isn't giving anything away, he's playing David Dellinger, who was a conscientious objector.
One of the most notable conscientious objectors of all time, we should say, too.
Yes. A Boy Scout troop leader, John Carroll Lynch looks like exactly what David Dellinger was. You just look at him, and except in Zodiac, where we're pretty sure he did it, right? We're pretty sure John Carroll Lynch is. I mean, we don't know who the Zodiac killer was, but...
Spoiler alert, sorry about that. Let's give...
Oh, damn. Oh, come on. But people have had enough time to see Zodiac. Can't there be a statute of limitations on spoilers? And I haven't given anything. We don't know who the Zodiac killer is. We have not ever. Anyway, you look at John Carroll Lynch, and he looks like the sweetest man in the world. And then his skills are unparalleled.
See, that's what I want to get to, too, because getting back to that opening, getting a chance to introduce that many characters that fast and to let us know who they are right away, to me, that kind of feels like the difference in some ways between writing a play and where you can give us visual information that tells that. Whereas when you're writing entrances for a play, people are literally walking in, entering. And so I just thought that finally became the thing that made you think, here's why this is a movie, because I can do this.
Yes, it is. You know, I said the riots, but I think in a lot of ways it was the prologue. That prologue was important to me, and I didn't know how to do it on stage unless it was a musical. There are things you can do in a musical number that are the equivalent of what we're talking about in the prologue. We're kind of getting off track a little bit because it's not a musical. I'm just saying I believe it could have worked as a musical. Not a Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, okay? Something more contemporary, but yes.
Well,
You're mocking me inside. You're not outwardly mocking me, but I know you, and I know that in your head you're thinking that's the worst idea I ever heard. It's not.
again, I would never say any of this to your face, but I've got to say too that one of the things that I think is really the most interesting about this, and it gets to this, something I think about that finally becomes a denouement for you in so many ways, is how fact and pride have to at some point intersect. You know, at some point somebody has to swallow his pride, his or her pride. It's Molly's father, which and I'm not gonna give anything away here. It becomes.
But I know who you're talking about.
That too feels like. I wonder when that occurred to you that was going to happen. Did you know that was going to happen as you were sitting down after you called up your father to get some information? If you knew that you want to end it in that way. I
knew, and again, I'm not trying to be coy, and I know that you're not either. But when I got to meet with, I got to spend time with Tom Hayden when I started working on this in 2006. He died a few years ago, but I got to spend time with Tom Hayden. And when Hayden told me, I think it may have been in our very first meeting, but when Hayden told me about the word that he accidentally left out of the speech, okay, I knew, are you kidding me? That it's what William Goldman would call having a great secret. Bill Goldman, when he was researching Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and he found out, and sorry, that movie came out in 1969, so the spoiler statute of limitations is gone. When he found out that the Sundance Kid couldn't swim, he knew, all I have to do is write them to that cliff, and I'm going to be in business. When the real Tom Hayden told me about that one word, I knew I had someplace to go to. I could sort of see land on the horizon.
Wow. Because I think what's interesting about this is that it's certainly a courtroom drama, but it is that thing that, and I don't want to give too much away, but this is actually something that's part of the public record that we can talk about, that Abby Hoffman says it's also a political trial. Which, go ahead.
Listen, Abby repeats a number of times, it's a political trial. Abby says we weren't arrested, we were chosen. And Abby, in his climactic scene, a face-off with Tom, said we weren't arrested because of what we did, we were arrested because of who we are. What we're seeing today, once again, is the demonization of dissent. It's not just someone who disagrees with you, it is someone who wants to see the destruction of America. And it's what's so chilling, what's so disheartening, although I want to make it clear, well, we've spent all this time talking about things that are chilling and disheartening, as we should have. This movie ends looking up. You're going to, at the end of the movie, you feel good. I want to make that clear. Sorry, you do feel good at the end of the movie. You're going to feel hopeful. But what makes it so disheartening is that we had been looking back at 1968 and saying, all of the 1960s, the whole civil rights movement, and saying, That was awful, but thank God we got through that and we're better, right? We don't have to do that again. And it's like building a house, having it almost finished, and then a gust of wind comes and knocks it down.
Yeah, or a tropical storm or a wildfire.
Or tropical storm or wildfires here in California. And we don't need to get into climate change in this conversation, but there's a conversation to be had about it.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about these two bookends for which the text of the book is climate change. But as you're talking about these guys, something that came to mind to me that made me think that you would love it immediately, which is to say, what Abby Hoffman is saying is these guys were a cast.
Exactly. The Chicago 7, and there were 8 of them, and that'll make sense once you see the movie. They were absolutely cast, including, as you know, we hear toward the end, Freunds and Weiner, who were put there so that the jury could find them not guilty and feel better about finding the other guys guilty. Everything was geared towards the jury's emotion. The black guy's scary. Those long-haired guys are crazy. I'm scared of them. These two over here, they're fine. They didn't seem to do much. We'll let them go. Yes, they were cast. John Mitchell even calls them the all-star team. These guys who they're being charged with conspiracy, and Joe Gordon-Levitt, he's playing the prosecutor, but he is ambivalent. He knows they should not be doing this. This is a mistake. But he points out in that scene with John Mitchell, it's going to be hard to get an indictment on conspiracy. Some of these guys have never met each other. One of the things I wanted to accomplish in that prologue in introducing all of them was that they're not all of the same stripe. They're not just, you can't just say these are 60s hippies, anti-war people, and have sympathy for the devil playing in the background. They were very different people representing very different groups with very different philosophies.
I say casting too, or they were cast rather. I bring that up just to say that it makes it, you were saying to people it's not really just a down, but it's also like a rousing entertainment just because these guys are cast in a way they're all so different and combustible that made for the same kind of entertainment that would make you want to turn this into a piece of drama in the first place.
Yeah, it's cast, I mean, cast by the government, not cast by me. It's cast by the government like a great caper movie. You couldn't have asked for a better posse to put together for that kind of thing. It's as if the government foresaw that there would be a movie about this one day and they wanted it to be good.
I think on that note, this is time we thank, and I've got his name here somewhere again. I think it's Aaron Sorkin.
Oh, before you thank her, can I thank you? Seriously, Elvis, talking to you, it's always not just fun, but you really do get me thinking about things in stuff I've done that I hadn't thought about before.
That's very kind of you, Aaron. Thank you. Let me thank you for letting me be part of this and let people to know to stick around. They get a chance to see some behind-the-scenes footage with the cast that we've been talking about here that you so well put together, and to keep an eye out for the movie, which will be premiering on October 16th. And thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
We're coming to Chicago peacefully, but whether we're given permits or not, we're coming.
Cops gotta be a half inch from losing their fucking minds. We're not concerned about it. We're counting on it.
One of the things I love about this film is that every character has an arc and every character has a moment, and I think it's a testament to the depth of the script and the delicious quality of Aaron's writing. He's attracted such a band of players.
We were asking these people, all of whom can and frequently do carry their own movies, to be part of an ensemble, a large ensemble.
You can't just put these guys on trial because you don't like them.
but that's what they did. These 8 defendants had a plan, and the plan was to incite a riot.
We believe that we are innocent, and the people who are really guilty of conspiracy are the fuckers who put us on trial. They are responsible for the bloodshed that flowed in the streets of Chicago.
Quite often as an actor, you're asked, what's your bucket list? Who do you dream of working with? There was only one person on that bucket list, and that was Aaron Sorkin.
Let me check on that.
Aaron Sorkin is renowned for a reason. His writing just goes.
Whenever you get a long script in your hands, you are terrified as a actor. But I just thought the script was completely captivating.
It just takes you away. It sweeps you into the story.
Just to be able to get into the room with a writer who has a very strong political perspective and then a very smart voice.
The U.S. attorney wanted a Negro defendant to scare the jury.
We all know nobody writes like Aaron. And so we don't just have a conductor, we also have our composer here who knows the music.
Eddie Redmayne is brilliant in the movie.
I'm an Englishman and knew an embarrassingly little amount about the Vietnam War. And then to try and come to grips with this profound movement and trying to get a sense of this amazing anarchic spirit that rose up.
Eddie is like ferociously intelligent person and also very generous and has a lot of perspective, and I think that's infused in all of his characters.
He has such a depth and such an authenticity and a nobility to his spirit that Tom had.
Take off the ropes, please.
Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin are the most famous. They were the heads of the Youth International Party, or Yippies, as they were called.
I was always interested in Abby Hoffman. He's this clown who is deeply passionate. He uses the media for political ends. He's funny. He's cool. He's got amazing hair.
He is a provocateur, playing a provocateur.
Shakespearean times, the fool was the guy who came and appeared to be the comic, but actually was somehow sort of busy exposing people to themselves. And I feel like what Sacha has done with a lot of his career, he's made people fall on their own swords.
Sacha, as we all know, is a brilliant clown. He went to clowning school, and Abby was a clown, who was also the most serious guy in the room. Sacha is too.
Somebody who believes in justice so much that they're prepared to sacrifice their life is a captivating character to play.
Do you have contempt for your government?
I'll tell you, Mr. Schultz, it's nothing compared to the contempt my government has for me.
Mark Rylance, who plays Bill Kunstler, you know, he's just one of my heroes. He's one of the greatest actors alive. It's like the earth moves sometimes when he does his work.
Mark Rylance is an actor's actor. I hate that phrase, but if anybody qualifies, he's one.
Getting to sit in a courtroom and watch Sir Mark Rylance fire off against, let's call him Sir Frank Langella, and it was extraordinary, strong and visceral and moving.
Richard Schultz, who's played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who is conflicted. He doesn't think they should be prosecuting these guys.
My parents were peace activists in the 60s and 70s, so I grew up knowing who Abby Hoffman was, knowing who the Yippies were, and my parents were excited, to say the least, when they heard that I was doing this, and then intrigued, if not dismayed, to hear that I would be playing the prosecution.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt, an amazing actor, intuitively excellent.
Aaron Sorkin has done a really smart and interesting thing in creating a character on the antagonistic side, on the prosecutor's side, that isn't just a bad guy. I admire that Richard Schultz was asking his questions based on principles rather than whether or not he personally likes the people involved.
Jerry, in this story, really is the militant, in a sense.
Hey, why don't you put down your guns, motherfuckers? We'll fight like fucking men.
Laying down in front of the troop train, stopping the troop trains going to Oakland.
Jeremy Strong is a wonderful actor. He embodies Jerry Rubin's sense of confrontation and provocation, both in the scenes and outside the scenes.
He's always in character. He's always believable. He's a great guy to have by your side. You just look to him, realize that I better start acting a bit better.
Bobby Seale was a figure that I knew of from growing up. And in the script, I think Aaron wrote a character that is extremely passionate, smart, witty, stands up for himself, and he's not to be defeated.
There are 8 of us here, and there are signs out there that read, "Free the Chicago 7." I'm not with them.
His back was never against the wall, and I was really attracted to the opportunity to bring that to the camera.
Yaya is doing such a fantastic job of bringing that real, sincere emotion to his performance.
The way Yahya does it is just, it's powerful and it's direct and it's authentic. Throughout the course of the trial, there was one person who was in support of Bobby Seale, and that person is Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton was a young African-American man. He was the Chicago leader of the Black Panther Party. Yahya Abdul-Mateen, he's wonderful. He makes me feel like he supports me and he sees me, so I think it mirrors a lot of ways, you know, Fred's relationship with Bobby. When I play a character who is living, one of my first instincts is to understand what they were after, and my performance is my interpretation of their needs, their wants, their voice, their desires, that's filtered through a lens of what's relevant in my own world today.
Now, David Dellinger was a Boy Scout troop leader. He was an 8th grade science teacher. He's also a conscientious objector and believed fervently in nonviolence.
Dave Dellinger is arguably the best person I will ever play. He was morally incorruptible. The truth of the moment that they were having, which is about protesting a corrupt government. Dave Dellinger, he had been a protester long enough to realize that the system was rigged against you. There's not any real trial going on. None of this actually matters. It was all previously decided.
Hear ye, hear ye. Judge Julius Hoffman presiding.
It's been quite an experience sitting in this room with Frank Langella. A lot of my favorite actors are the chameleons who you don't recognize because they're so different every time.
I think the biggest challenge is just not making him a one-note villain. Everybody's human.
This judge is supposed to be following the rules. He's supposed to be an impartial arbiter of justice, but he's clearly not impartial.
Whenever it's a real person, I research as much as I can. He had simply no interest in being fair. None.
There will be order!
I find a couple of moments where in coverage.
It's such a formidable group. It's just been a joy to watch this team of heavyweights slug it out.
I think all the actors really gravitated toward the words on the page, and I think they gravitated toward the opportunity to come in to do something that felt relevant.
Aaron said when we started this, it's a movie that's set in 1968, but it's like a transponder that goes back into history, touches on a certain moment, and sends that signal back to today.
It could not be more pertinent. I suppose the role of film is to in some way, well, to entertain and to thrill, but also to reflect what's going on in our world. And at a time in which I feel like all of us are having to repeat as a mantra, remember our history, learn from our history. This specific moment feels sensationally important.
When we walked in here this morning, they were chanting that the whole world is watching.
If we leave here without saying anything about why we came in the first place, it'll be heartbreaking.
You have to find some courage now.